Ladies and gentlemen, inflate your aerostat, reorient your scoop, and thank Cremation Charlie for his sacrifice.
Because it's time to talk Tull to me. Cremation Charlie, we hardly knew ye. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talk Tull to Me. I am Nick McGill.
And I am Omen Sade. We are Feckless Momes. And this is Talk Tull to Me, a hot air balloon ride over that mysterious country that is the collected works of prog rock band Jethro Tull, with you, dear listener, as our ballast. From the valley of stand-up to the mountains of Stormwatch, we will float high enough to gain some perspective. But do we have enough gas to make it through the 90s? Will we, Icarus-like, fly too close to the sun? Stay tuned and find out.
Don't you sometimes have to throw ballast out if you're...
Sometimes you do have to. Yes, you do. We're looking at you,
sorry,
Germany.
Listeners. We have a strong Germany contingent, so
Yeah.
I apologize.
He can press a lot, actually.
If I knew how to apologize in German, I would do that right now. But I don't. Guten Tag.
You just give them Poland.
Yeah. Ooh, too soon? Maybe. This week we have nothing because Thick as a Brick is so thick. We are going to. So I'm so sorry. The fervor got out of control. So, as promised last week, Omen is going to grace us with the Rolling Stones review for Thick as a Brick, which I, for one, am very excited about because they've been so all over the map with the last, I think we've been doing it for what, 2-3 albums now?
Yeah. Maybe we've actually done it for every single album, but at any rate, it's a lovely... Hi, Tiki. It's a lovely check-in for us, because it's easy for us to get caught up in our own opinions about the albums, and it's nice to know what Rolling Stone thought about it.
I half agree because I don't put a whole lot into what Rolling Stones has shown us so far, but I'm also very excited to hear what they have to say.
Now, Nick, this is a longish review, so feel free to cut out whatever of it you like.
Okay. And who is our reviewer?
This Rolling Stones review is brought to us by your friend and mine, Ben Gerson.
He must have had the Jethro Tull beat. That's the only logical explanation.
He was in early on a Monday when the first album came across the desk, and he was new, so he got it.
Yep.
And little did his editor realize that it would be a lifelong career for him.
So many albums. I wonder if he's still doing them.
So many albums.
I can't wait to see.
All right, are you ready?
Exciting. Yes. Ben Gerson, what have you got to say about Thick as a Brick?
Tiki, please stop. Tiki?
She's mouthy today.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm not editing any of it out.
Go.
Sorry. Is she meowing because I left the room?
She's meowing, yes, because we're not in the same room. From the desk of Ben Gerson, Rolling Stone magazine, June 22nd, 1972, at 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
That's not the first time we've seen that 4 a.m. thing either.
Although not in the shops yet, I was able to acquire a white label pressing of the current Jethro winner, Thick as a Brick, from their London agents, Chrysalis Artists. The group consists of Ian Anderson, Martin Barr, John Evan, Jeffrey Hammond, and Barrymore Barlow. Written around a poem by St. Cleeve child prodigy Gerald Bostick, their music spins a delicate web of sensitive sounds, sometimes lilting, sometimes soaring, to form a brilliant backdrop for the meaningful lyrics and improvisational techniques. Quote, one doubts at times the validity of what appears to be an expanding theme throughout the two continuous sides of this record, but the result is at worst entertaining and at least aesthetically palatable. End quote. Ian Anderson, aka Julian Stone Mason B.A., has not only slyly reviewed his own album, he's also supplied the newspaper which contains it. So that quote was from Ian Anderson in the liner notes about the album.
Very clever. Okay.
Like so much flounder, Thick as a Brick comes wrapped in the St. Cleeves Chronicle, an apocryphal yet typical daily of Anderson's design. Played across the front page is the Gerald Little Milton Bostick scandal. The epithet refers to the author of Paradise Lost, not the soul singer. 8-year-old Gerald is adjudged unfit to accept first prize from the Society for Literature Advancement and Gestation, SLAG, by virtue of the questionable contents of his epic poem, Thick as a Brick. Gerald is one of Ian Anderson's incarnations and ruses. Besides lyricist and impersonator, Anderson is also composer, arranger, singer, flutist, acoustic guitarist, violinist, saxophonist, trumpeter, satirist, and overall conceptualizer. His adeptness at most of these functions, in particular his ability to balance and fuse them, has created one of rock's most sophisticated and groundbreaking products. Oh!
There it is.
Who's eating crow now?
Cut through all of the meat.
Yeah. Most of the Chronicle's features display a dry, fatuous, very English sense of humor. Under the deaths column, there is the late Charles Stiff, and stories have titles along the lines of Mongrel Dog Soils Actor's Foot and Non-Rabbit Missing. Characters in, say, a page 2 story will turn up again on page 5 in equally ludicrous circumstances. It's all very clever, yet at first seemingly irrelevant. Page 7 carries the words to Thick as a Brick. The writing is very dense and enigmatic, and the unidentified shifts in narrative voice compound the difficulty. The poem, as best as I can make out, is a sweeping social critique, as pessimistic about poets, painters, and the generally virtuous as it is condemnatory of politicians and other figures of authority. And what more perfectly encompasses or embodies the world Anderson aims to criticize than a daily newspaper? Wow. Even the review is meta. The paper, in turn, encompasses the poem. Furthermore, there are names in the poem which refer back to items in the newspaper. The poem reviews the newspaper just as Stonemason reviewed the record. The entire package operates with the elusiveness of a Nabokov novel. Like Wind-Up on Aqualung, Ian asks to, quote, spin me back down the years and the days of my youth, end quote. The son who is pronounced, quote, fit to fight, end quote, is helpless and incontinent. The man, quote, fit for peace, quote, we'll teach him to be a wise man, how to fool the rest, end quote. There are only...
So many quotes.
I'm going to stop doing the quotes then. It's too many. There are only the doer and the thinker, the wise men and the fools. Yet the distinction hardly matters. Quote, let me help you to pick up your dead as the sins of the fathers are fed with the blood of the fools and the thoughts of the wise. End quote. Failure is inescapable. Mundane yearnings for the immortal Anderson renders with the absurdity of John Lennon's a soap impression of his wife that he ate and donated to the National Trust. And where are all the sportsmen who always pulled you through? They're all resting down in Cornwall, writing up their memoirs for a paperback edition of the Boy Scout Manual. Stitched unobtrusively into this fabric of decay is a thread of salvation, and it lies in the music.
It started out positive, I think, but then it just, he's so verbose, and it's just so unnecessary, and I don't know if that was just the style of the time or what, but I just, I lose track of what the hell he's saying. It's
Sure.
basically it's review and it's Cliff's Notes. It's a Cliff's Notes, but it's even harder to understand than the actual song.
That's a good point. I mean, I will say that I think that the style is probably somewhat a product of its time.
Sure.
And I think that there's an attempt to really, even though it's an extremely verbose and very, as you say, complex and almost opaque at times, writing about the music, I think that there is a genuine attempt to get to the real meat of the matter and to really investigate what the album is about and how they are achieving the effect that they're achieving.
Okay. I'm gonna be honest. I have to take your word for it because I had difficulty understanding what he was saying.
I think it helps if you are reading it on the page, as I was,
Yes.
rather than listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should include a link to the review in our show notes.
Sure.
Oh, look, it's already in there.
Who put that there?
Who put that there? I think that the thing he especially well does is breaking down the kind of layers of humor that Anderson is playing with between the lyrics, the music, and the fake newspaper that he has created and all the intricacies within that. It's almost like he prefers to talk about that than the actual lyrics because, as we have also discovered, they're fairly frickin' opaque.
Yes. Yeah. I acknowledge that, but kind of what I said earlier is I kind of stick with that is like where there's no accessibility to this review. And there's no unless that was just the way it was at the time was we are so highly intellectual we here at Rolling Stone that we are just going to spout diatribe for the sake of big words.
Maybe that was the case. Also, I suspect that the reason that the timestamps are always 4 a.m. is because Ben Gerson is English and living in England. And so I think there's a bit more of an English approach to it. Not that the English are necessarily more verbose or intellectual than we meat-guzzling Americans are. But I do think that it sounds like he comes from a certain, I want to say, like, class of thinkers. You know what I mean? Like, he probably went to a fancy private school and got a degree in writing, and then this is what he ended up doing.
Yeah.
And, probably he was writing for his peers, people who use language the same way that he does.
I think you're right. And I genuinely hope that, because I want to keep doing the reviews, but I hope either he lightens up or they get someone else. It's just frustrating to hear that for me.
Yeah. What if I did it in a fun accent?
Your Ben Gerson accent?
Yeah.
What would your Ben Gerson accent be?
Let me pull the review up again. Ian Anderson, a.k.a. Julian Stone Mason, B.A.
I couldn't listen to that for a half an hour.
Has not only slyly reviewed his own album. Is that better?
That's good. You're getting better. Yeah.
He's also supplied the newspaper which contains it.
I like that one. That's good.
All right, that'll be the next Ben Gerson.
Please.
So, Nick, thank you for tuning in to our newest podcast, Rave Reviews to Me, where we dissect word by word paragraph by paragraph, every review that Ben Gerson has ever written. But now, would you like to get back to Talk Tull to Me and have a listen to the current section of Thick as a Brick?
I think we ought to. Oh, this portion is called The Poet and the Painter. Okay.
Goodness me, Nick.
So that was, I think, what, a minute or 5.5 minutes? I think that came out to be.
Yeah, just about.
That, of all the themes that we hear, that is, I think, my favorite, lyrically and sound-wise.
Which do you want to tackle first, the sound or lyrics?
Let's do...
Although, for this, they may increasingly be harder to separate.
Yeah. Let's focus on sound first.
Amazing. You know what I very much enjoy about the sound of this section?
What's that?
How it sounds. The thing.
Well put.
The very first thing we hear is that kind of like organ dun 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 dun. And it reminds me, I don't know if this was intentional, probably it was. It reminds me of a news sting, you know, dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
Such talk news. Here we have a report of something happening.
Yeah.
Exactly. It almost sounds like maybe that's what old Gerson was referring to as the telegraphic syncopation or something.
Yeah.
And then straight away we have this military style drum riff come in. And then almost immediately after that, the flute comes in a very contrasting style, very very lyrical, very unregulated, very seemingly uncontrolled, and they seem really at odds with each other thematically. You know, they create a real tension. They're pulling at each other.
Yeah. Which has, it's gone from the lyrics being kind of differing from the sound of the music, which we heard in that first portion.
Yes.
And Really Don't Mind. And now it's, particularly because a great chunk of this 5.5 minutes is instrumental, they're really working on that feeling of unease, almost a cacophony, where they don't quite fit together, the two sounds, but seen overall, they do still blend.
Well, I think that they almost represent poles, opposing poles of feeling.
Okay.
And that is such a great setup for leading us into the lyrical themes of this next section, because for me it's really all about opposing duality.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big moment of dualism.
Okay. Do you and should this leads us right into the lyrics?
Yeah, I think it can.
Before we get into nitty gritty, I just want to say between this whole chunk of lyrics and going back to, so you ride yourselves over the fields and you make all your animal deals. The reason that always felt like medieval almost,
Yes.
is because of the poet and the painter portion. Talking about the soldiers sheathing their sword, and
Sure.
you don't think about poets present day. You think of like a poet in the employ of a king or queen, you know, something
Indeed.
like that.
Although, shout out to all the modern poets.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I can't think of any, but
Ta-Nehisi Coates, poet
Okay.
laureate.
oh, great. I saw a book of poetry while I was getting a coffee yesterday, and I picked it up and read a poem.
And you are going to recite that poem right now.
Ruri Kapal? Something like that.
Not present.
So, yes. What were we talking about?
We were talking about the
Oh, the medieval factor.
at least for me, the imagery of, and because that's how it formed in my head, what, 30, 20 years ago at this point, I can't not see it when I listen to this song.
Well, I don't think it's just you. I mean, the thing is full. the whole lyric, the whole poem, if we want to call it that, is bereft of anything that pulls it into modernity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's full of all these references that kind of take us back to either an imagined or a real kind of classical past.
Yeah.
Poet and the painter, the cattle quietly grazing, the builder of castles, the milking girl, the innocent young master, the poet sheathes his pen. You know, all of this feels in a different time period than ours.
Yeah, it could. There's nothing that specifically pins it to that old period,
Right.
but just the imagery given to us. So it could technically be allegorically present day. Like building castles by the sea doesn't have to be castles. Could be giant mansions, you know?
Exactly.
So I'm going to try to disconnect that thought of
Disconnect away, Nick.
I'm going disconnect the of strictly thinking of it as that medieval kind of thing, and see it as more allegorically of present day / 70 whatever 70. Wait for it. 72.
It feels timeless to me.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It
Sort of anti-historical.
it can fit to whatever period you want. It can fit to whatever imagery that you want for
It's almost mythic in the sense that it applies not to any specific time period, but to the human condition itself.
Yeah, that was good. That was really good.
you.
All right, so let's get into lyrics themselves.
Yes, let's.
So overall, we're a lot like you said musically. That there are these two pieces that kind of just don't work, that kind of don't fit together. Lyrically, we're also seeing that in our themes
Right.
of the poet and the painter both being people with a profession, but
Right,
they
but diametrically opposed.
yeah, absolutely.
And that's what the whole thing is full of it. You have this war versus artists. You have the soldier versus the poet. You have the youngest of the family versus authority. You have even things that are more like abstractly opposed. You know, the idea of a tardy tide. There's no such thing. Tides are inherently on time. The tide waits for no man. So the idea of a tardy tide presents this almost impossible duality.
And I think talking about the poet and the painter ties back to ties back to the sun. And
indeed.
You put him to a trade. You teach him monopoly, and this is kind of that fighting against that idea of being forced into a trade or doing the thing that's going to make you money, the most money, because that's what you do.
Right. The mercenary's creed.
Yeah.
It's interesting that he includes the word mercenary rather than just soldier, because a mercenary specifically fights for money.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a soldier is motivated, by, in theory at least, love of country or duty.
And in this case, mercenary could be anything. A mercenary does anything for money.
Indeed.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a fighter, per se.
Right. Whereas a poet does nothing for money.
Yeah, fair enough. I think, and I think we're supposed to think this. This is also commentary. This is Gerald's feelings of being a poet and seeing the rest of his life ahead of him and what he is supposed to be doing versus what he clearly wants to be doing, which is writing poetry. Very, very beautiful and imagery heavy and biting poetry.
Now, Nick, do you mind if I put a little more gas in the balloon and take us a bit higher?
I would love that. We definitely shouldn't use. We shouldn't have a water balloon fight with balloons filled with gas, though. That would.
Oh, no. We learned
Terrible.
our lesson last time. So I think that yes, there is the contrast between the speaker, let's call the speaker Gerald, because that's the character Ian invented, having a conflict between what he desires to do, let's call it poetry, and what he's being forced to do, which is to draw his sword. And I also think that there is, getting back to John Bostic?
Gerald.
Ben Gerson? What am I talking about? There's also
Oh gosh.
getting sort of toward Ben Gerson's.
Gerald Bostock is GB and Ben Gerson is BG. Oh, read between the
Need
lines.
a nap. Getting to Ben Gerson's point about social critique, I think that what we are having here is a world presented to us where it is impossible to exist in a way. It is impossible to be the poet because the world demands this military engagement. And that there's something.
You're saying conscription, or just in general that it's that the world is a violent place?
The world operates in I would call it a violent capitalist mode.
Yeah.
And
An aggressively
everything-
capitalist.
Aggressively capitalist. And everything stems from that. And it feels at times almost apocalyptic. It reminded me of a phrase, and I looked it up and I realized that it reminded me of the beginning of a poem by William Butler Yeats. William Butler Yeats. It reminded me of a poem by William Butler Yeats. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
the first-
I'm super intrigued.
Just the first bit, and I think that I really feel like there's a lot of sympathetic vibration here.
Okay. And what is the time period of this poem, do you know? What about William Butler Yeats? I don't even
Yeah.
know.
He was born, and I think he's probably dead.
End of story.
End of story. I don't actually know. Let me see. I'm going to look it up really quick. 20th century Anglo-Irish, 1865 to 1939.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So William Butler Yeats was operating in the early 20th century, late 19th century.
Okay.
So this is the intro, or rather the first paragraph from The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats.
Okay.
Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity.
Yeah, I get it. I hear it. So take me through this poem. Take me through this excerpt that you just gave us.
Okay, well, I may be an expert on yeeting, but not on yating. I may not be a Yatespert, but I'll see what I can do.
There we go. That's better.
Let me get my William Butler into this seat. Hold on a sec. Let me Uber Yates the meaning to myself. Wow, none of that is usable, Nick. So, obviously, this is a very well researched, and probably people have written more about this poem than Yeats wrote himself. But I get the sense of, I think it's in the phrase, the center cannot hold. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. And that's what I get from this, is that there is something so fundamentally amiss with the world that the very essence of nature itself is being perverted. So in Yeats we have the blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. With Ian Anderson, we have And the youngest of the family is moving with authority, building castles by the sea. He dares the tardy tide to wash them all aside.
And the youngest of the family is moving with authority, building castles by the sea. He dares the tardy tide to watch them all aside.
You have the same kind of like, the youngest of the family shouldn't be in charge. And yet the youngest of the family is moving with authority. And the tide itself is late. And the castles are something that should be a solid structure is being built out of sand by a child. So it's sort of like
Right.
Everything is wrong. Everything is the opposite of how it should be. And yet here we are.
And it was just a natural progression of things that we were all so comfortable letting it get to this point. It was too late by the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. And the eldest went off to war and died and this and that. So now we only have the 12-year-old who is the master of the family.
Right. And I think that it's more on a spiritual sense than a literal sense.
Right.
Yeah, anyway, that's what it makes me think of. But that's the sense of this section for me is that the center cannot hold, things fall apart. The home fire is burning, the kettle's almost boiling, but the master of the house is far away.
Fire burning, the kettle almost boiling, but the master of the house is far away.
Things are working against their purpose, in a way.
And I kind of want to go back in our next lines is there's a feeling of inevitability and a solidity to this stuff happening and progressing, whether we want it to or not, whether we're aware of it or not. And while everything is falling apart for society or this family or whatever, the next two lines in the stanza are the cattle quietly grazing at the grass down by the river where the
Right.
swelling mountain water moves onward to the sea.
The cattle quietly grazing at the grass down by the river, where the swelling mountain water moves onward to the sea.
Cows are always just going to eat grass. The water's going to move downhill to the sea.
Yes.
They're
Yes, so-
inevitabilities.
Right. So then, you're totally right. He sets up this huge paragraph where everything is at odds with each other, and then as you say, we return to this. He flips it on it. He inverts it so that now we have a moment where things are as they should be.
It's almost a really quick, sweet pastoral glimpse of just a quick cut in between the chaos, almost.
And is it introduced to that for the same reason that we eat cranberry sauce with our turkey, Nick? To give us a bit of a contrast so that when we get back to the meaty flavor, it tastes more intense?
I mean, anything to make turkey taste better, but yeah.
Oh, the shade.
Oh, turkey's just a terrible bird.
Wow.
Go for duck or chicken, hands down. Sorry, big turkey. Shots fired.
Tune into...
Jive turkey with me?
Oh, that's good.
There it
That's
is.
good.
There it is. I think it is a contrast, and I think it's a lot of what we've been talking about this whole episode in the terms of the poet and the painter and the flute and the guitar, and now the familial man-made chaos and just nature doing its thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. It's nature, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like you're not going to make a cow do something different. You're not going to
Believe me, Nick, I've tried.
you can dam and move streams and everything, but gravity will inevitably be pulling that water down. It's only temporary that you're going to be stopping it.
Water gonna do its thing.
Water gonna water.
Wawa.
Well, I love in.
I'm glad that you do. I'm
I
glad
do.
that you
I
have
love
that capacity.
Period. The human aspects of this track, the innocent young master, the milking girl, et cetera,
Yes.
it all feels so dramatic and really almost tragic, but in the grand scheme of things, it also feels relatively inconsequential.
Oh.
If that makes sense. It like in the long run, this stuff really isn't going to be that bad. It's only going to affect a generation or two.
Well, I mean, to perhaps slather some butter on that point, we have
Always where I put butter.
So we have, in the previous stanza, we have the youngest of the family building castles by the sea, and then there's a bit of a break, and then we have the little moment with the cattle, lovely, and then we have the builder of the castles renews the age-old purpose. Ooh, what is the age-old purpose? Well, maybe it is telling that he contemplates the milking girl, whose offer is his need.
The builder of the castles renews the age-old purpose and contemplates the milking girl whose offer is his need.
Yeah.
That gives us a sense of what the purpose is. It's sex.
It's procreation, yeah. The
Right.
age-old purpose.
And then, a little bit later on, we have, and it feels like time is progressing. We have, there's a sense of time moving on, things developing. When we jump to the end of that stanza, the oldest of the family is moving with authority, coming from across the sea. He challenges the son, who puts him on the run.
And the oldest of the family is moving with authority, coming from across the sea. He challenges the sun, who puts him to the run.
Like, yeah, you left a child playing with sand by the seashore, but now he's knocked up a milkmaid and he's got a sword in his hand, and actually you can't drive him out of this world that he's created for himself.
Yeah,
He's become the king of his sandcastle.
you're being away, presumably as a soldier.
Yeah.
Your being away has left enough of a disconnect
Right.
that you, even though you're older, you've been written out of the story.
Yeah, how does that make you feel now, Dad?
Oh God.
I just wanted to build a sandcastle with you. And next week, Nick, we're going to get into even more daddy issues with
Oh my
the
gosh.
next section.
The old man. Yeah.
Ooh, boy.
Yeah.
Now, Nick,
Yeah, someone.
we have talked at length and at depth and at width about Ian Henderson's relationship with his father as expressed in his lyrics. If Little Gerald is a fictional child version of Ian Anderson, what do you think that this section is saying about his home life? I give you license to speculate.
Well, I mean, I think we've hit on it before, is that maybe Ian was expected to carry on in the boiler fluid business, and he just wanted to.
He was expected to pick up the sword of boiler fluid.
Yes, the soiler fluid, and instead of doing that, he wanted to build castles, i.e., create music.
Yeah.
Each song is a sandcastle.
Each
that we
song is a
listen to.
sandcastle. And we are the hungry tide trying to consume it all.
The tardy tide.
We are the tardy tide. Yes, we are.
That may have to be, instead of Tull skulls, we'll call our followers the tardy tide.
So, Nick,
Yes, Omen.
This is obviously a continued conversation, and
And will continue to continue.
it will continue to be continued. Is there anything else that you want to say about this section right now before we sign off and tide ourselves away? I lost it.
I just think you brought up a good point. Let's keep this story in mind. Let's keep this theme rolling in our heads as we get into next week's What Do You Do When the Old Man's Gone and From the Upper Class, because it's
Right.
as a true concept prog album, it's building on itself and it's getting
Oh, it does.
it's planting the seeds for a greater harvest the further we go on.
Oh, yes. Thank you, metaphor.
So I think let's just keep that in mind for future episodes.
Well, until next time, there's no reason for the tide of your review to be tardy. Sheath your sword, pick up your poet's pen, and write us an eloquent review on iTunes.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that one better.
We would like to quietly graze on the grass of your 5-star rating.
Let me ruminate on your review.
I
Because a cow, they ruminate.
am a milking girl.
My offer is your need. Oh, gosh.
Until next time, I'm Omen Sade.
And I am Nick McGill.
We are Feckless Momes.
And this is Talk Tull to Me.
Would you like some milk? Would you like some milk? Ooh, a pretty cow. Ooh, Mrs. Jenkins, you're full of the butter today, aren't you?
To me. Feckless Momes. Audio Network.